Kiara Hunt woke up to the smell of blood and the worst headache she'd had in at least 6 months. Not a great combination, if anyone was asking. Nobody was asking, because nobody ever asked Kiara anything anymore, which was fine. Totally fine, she told herself, as she peeled her face off the pillow and immediately regretted every life choice that had led to this moment. 36 years old as of yesterday. Celebrated with a bottle of whiskey that cost less than a sandwich. Living the dream on Kathic 5, the armpit of the colonial territories, where the air smelled like sulfur and broken promises, and where she, a zenobiologist with actual credentials from an actual university, was currently employed at a wildlife rehabilitation center that had temporarily suspended her paycheck 3 weeks ago. Temporarily. Right. Just like her landlord was going to, temporarily, throw her out on the street if she didn't come up with rent by the end of the week. Kiara groaned and sat up, her apartment spinning like a carnival ride operated by someone with a personal vendetta. Her mouth tasted like something had died in it, which, given her line of work, was not entirely metaphorical. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, torn work pants, a tank top with suspicious stains she'd stopped questioning months ago, and one sock. Just one. Where the other sock had gone was a mystery for the ages. She stumbled out of her bedroom, squinting against the pale green sunlight filtering through the windows, and froze. Her front door was wide open, not just unlocked, not just ajar. Fully, completely, aggressively open, like it was making a statement about personal boundaries and had decided it wanted none. "Oh, fantastic," Kiara muttered, her heart doing a little tap dance of panic. "I got robbed. Perfect birthday present. Thanks, universe. You really shouldn't have." She crept forward, looking around for a weapon, and settling on an empty bottle from last night's pity party. Not ideal, but it had heft, and if she was going down, she was going down swinging. Except, wait. Her ancient television was still mounted on the wall. Her laptop, battered and held together with actual tape, sat untouched on the counter. Her collection of xenobiology research tablets, worth more than everything else she owned combined, remained in their charging station. Nothing was missing. Instead, something had been added. Kiara's brain, still struggling through the whiskey fog, tried to process what she was seeing in her kitchen. Meat. Not just a little meat. Not a few steaks someone had dropped off as a weird prank. 50 pounds, easily, of raw, red, glistening meat, piled in the center of her kitchen floor like some kind of carnivore's fever dream. Steaks, roasts, whole chickens, things she couldn't even identify. Possibly alien cuts, possibly terrestrial. Definitely expensive. The pile reached almost to her waist, wrapped in translucent butcher paper that was already leaking bloody juices onto her floor. And sitting on top of the meat mountain, arranged in a neat little pile like they were the cherry on top of the world's most disturbing sundae, were 4 coins. Kiara blinked. Blinked again. Rubbed her eyes, wondering if the cheap whiskey had finally completed its mission to destroy her brain cells. The meat remained. The coins remained. The open door remained. "What?" she said aloud to her empty apartment. "In the actual hell?" She approached slowly, bottle still in hand, half convinced this was some kind of elaborate hallucination brought on by stress and alcohol poisoning. But no, the smell was real, that iron-rich scent of fresh meat, and when she knelt down beside the pile, her knees squelching in meat juice. Gross, so gross. The coins were solid and real beneath her fingers. Hexagonal, about the size of her palm, made from some kind of iridescent metal that shifted colors in the light, flowing from deep purple to burnished gold. Each coin had intricate engravings on both sides, geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long, and symbols she recognized from her work. Kathic trade tokens. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. Kiara's hangover immediately took a back seat to the spike of adrenaline that shot through her system. She snatched up the coins, turning them over in her hands, her mind racing. Kathic trade tokens were serious business. The indigenous species of HFY, the Kathic people, feline-like beings who'd been here thousands of years before humans showed up with their flags and their mining equipment and their terrible coffee, used these tokens for high-value transactions. Each coin represented significant wealth, backed by the tribal councils and accepted as legal tender throughout the colony. These 4 coins, Kiara knew from having to deal with financial reports at the center, were worth exactly, she did quick mental math, her brain protesting every number, 1,000 colonial credits, which was, and this is where her heart started doing something complicated and arrhythmic, exactly what she owed in rent. Exactly. To the credit. Okay, Kiara said, her voice coming out higher than intended. Okay, so someone broke into my apartment, left me enough meat to feed a small army, and paid my rent. This is... She couldn't finish the sentence because she didn't have words for what this was. Her eyes drifted to the open door, then back to the meat, then to the coins in her hand. A terrible, impossible, absolutely ridiculous suspicion was forming in the back of her mind. The Cubs! No, no way. Absolutely not. Except, Kiara lurched to her feet, slipping slightly in meat juice, and grabbed her comm unit from the counter. Her hands were shaking as she pulled up the rehabilitation center's security app, her fingers leaving bloody smears on the screen. Please be there. Please be there. Please be. The feed from enclosure K3 loaded, grainy and washed out in the early morning light. 3 small forms, curled up together in the sleeping nook, looking absolutely angelic and innocent. Rumble, Pip, and Flick. The cubs. Her cubs, though she wasn't supposed to think of them that way, wasn't supposed to get attached, wasn't supposed to do any of the things she'd been doing for the past 8 months. 3 juvenile Kathic aliens, each about the size of a large dog, covered in dense fur that ranged from russet red to silver gray. 6 legs apiece, folded beneath them in sleep. Tufted ears that twitched occasionally. Faces that looked almost feline, but with an intelligence in their large, dark eyes that was unmistakably sentient. They'd been brought to the center as orphans after their pack was killed in a mining accident. Corporate negligence, of course, which meant nobody was held responsible, which meant these 3 babies had nowhere else to go. Kiara had been their primary caretaker since day 1. She stared at the feed, watching Rumble's chest rise and fall with slow, peaceful breaths. Pip was drooling slightly, one paw twitching in dream. Flick, the smallest, was wedged between his brothers, seeking comfort even in sleep. They looked so innocent. They also looked suspiciously well-rested for anyone who'd spent the night breaking and entering. "You didn't," Kiara whispered to the screen. "Tell me you didn't." But even as she said it, pieces were clicking into place. Last night? Okay. She'd been drunk, definitely drunk, but she remembered going to the center after the bar closed. She'd been sad and maudlin and convinced that nobody in the entire galaxy cared whether she lived or died. She'd sat outside the Cubs' enclosure, on the cold concrete floor, drinking straight from the bottle and rambling. About her birthday, about how she was alone, about the rent, about how she was going to lose her apartment, lose her job, lose everything. and maybe she should just give up and go back to Earth with her tail between her legs. The cubs had been awake, watching her through the reinforced glass. Rumble had pressed his front paws against the barrier, his ears forward, those intelligent eyes fixed on her face. She'd even, oh God, she'd actually cried in front of them, told them they were the only good thing in her life, that she was sorry she couldn't do more for them, couldn't save the center, couldn't even save herself. Had they understood? Kathic juveniles didn't speak, wouldn't develop language capabilities until they matured. But they were smart, really smart, possibly smarter than most adult humans, if Kiara was being honest. Smart enough to pick a lock? Smart enough to navigate a colony settlement at night? Smart enough to acquire trade tokens and 50 pounds of meat? Kiara zoomed in on the enclosure door in the feed, squinted at the lock mechanism. It looked intact, but she knew from experience that these cubs were little geniuses when it came to puzzle solving. She'd had to upgrade their enrichment toys 5 times because they kept figuring them out in under an hour. Her comm unit buzzed. A message from the center's automated system. Overnight security footage, corrupted, technical error, maintenance required. Of course it is, Kiara said flatly. Of course the one night I need to see footage, it's corrupted. Nothing suspicious about that at all. She looked back at the meat pile, at the coins, at her open door. Then she looked down at herself, covered in mystery stains, standing in a puddle of meat juice, holding a bottle in one hand and illegal currency in the other, with a hangover that could kill a lesser woman. Kiara started laughing. She couldn't help it. The laugh came bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest, tinged with hysteria and disbelief, and something that might have been joy. 3 alien cubs, babies, really, orphans who'd lost everything, had apparently broken out of a rehabilitation center, gone shopping with their allowance or stolen goods or who even knew what, and delivered rent money and groceries to her doorstep. It was the sweetest, most illegal, most absolutely insane thing anyone had ever done for her. "I'm going to prison," she announced to the empty apartment. "I'm definitely going to prison, but at least I'll have paid rent first." She needed to think, needed to figure out what to do, needed to. Someone knocked on her open door. Kiara spun around, hiding the coins behind her back like a guilty teenager, which was stupid because the 50 pounds of meat in her kitchen was significantly harder to explain. Hux stood in her doorway, his expression cycling through confusion, concern, and barely suppressed amusement in the span of about 3 seconds. Hux was the rehabilitation center's maintenance guy, lanky, perpetually sunburned despite the planet's weak sun, with a shock of red hair that stuck up at all angles and a tendency to wear the same oil-stained jumpsuit every single day. He was also, inconveniently, one of the only people at the center Kiara actually liked. "Hey," he said slowly, his eyes taking in the scene. "So, interesting morning? You could say that. Is that meat?" "Yep. Like, a lot of meat. 50 pounds, approximately." "Cool, cool, cool." Hux scratched his head. "Any particular reason you've got 50 pounds of meat on your floor at—" He checked his comm unit. 6 in the morning? Kiara opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the meat, looked at Hux. "Birthday present," she finally said. "From who?" She pulled the coins from behind her back and held them up wordlessly. Hux's eyes went wide. "Are those Kathic trade tokens?" "Yes." "4 of them?" "Yes." "That's exactly 1 month's rent?" "Also yes." Hux stepped into the apartment, carefully avoiding the meat juice spreading across the floor. He moved closer, examining the coins without touching them, then looked at Kiara with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Kiara," he said quietly, "where did you get these?" "That," she replied, meeting his eyes, "is an excellent question." 15 minutes later, Kiara was in Hux's beat-up transport vehicle, racing toward the rehabilitation center with wet hair, mismatched shoes, and 4 Kathic trade tokens burning a hole in her jacket pocket. The meat was currently sitting in her bathtub, covered in ice she'd panic-bought from the corner store. Because apparently that was her life now, storing evidence of possible alien crime in her bathroom while trying not to have a complete mental breakdown. "Okay, walk me through this again," Hux said, swerving around a cargo hauler with the casual disregard for traffic laws that made him an excellent getaway driver and a terrible insurance risk. "You got drunk, went to the center, cried at the Cubs. I didn't cry at them. I cried near them. You cried, told them about your rent situation, went home, and woke up to meat and money." "Correct. And you think 3 juvenile Kathic aliens, who are supposed to be locked in a reinforced enclosure designed to hold creatures twice their size, somehow broke out, went shopping, and came back without anyone noticing?" Kiara stared out the window at the early morning streets of the colony settlement. "When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous." "It is ridiculous, but not impossible." Hux was quiet for a moment, navigating through the industrial district where the center was located. Finally, he sighed. "No, not impossible. I've seen Rumble figure out a 12-step locking mechanism in under 2 minutes. Pip can operate a standard data tablet better than most humans. And Flick has anxiety, but follows his brothers anywhere," Kiara finished. "I know. Trust me. I know exactly how smart they are." They pulled into the center's parking lot, empty except for the overnight security guard's vehicle. Kiara's stomach twisted into knots as they approached the building, a squat prefab structure that looked exactly like what it was. An underfunded government operation that barely scraped by. Hux keyed in his access code, and they slipped inside. The rehabilitation center was quiet in the early morning, just the hum of life support systems and the occasional sound of movement from the various enclosures. They housed 23 creatures currently, a mix of indigenous Kathic fauna and some off-world species that had been abandoned or injured by colonists. Enclosure K3 was in the back corner. Kiara's heart hammered as they approached. The cubs were awake now, play-fighting in their habitat, a space that had been designed to mimic natural Kathic terrain with climbing structures, hiding spots, and a small water feature. Rumble had Pip in a headlock, both of them rolling across the floor in a tangle of legs and fur. Flick watched from an elevated perch, his tail twitching. They looked so normal, so innocent. "Hey, babies," Kiara said softly, pressing her hand against the glass. All 3 cubs immediately stopped playing. 6 dark eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Rumble disentangled himself from Pip and padded over to the glass, pressing his nose against it right where her hand rested. His tail swished slowly back and forth. "Did you have an interesting night?" Kiara asked. Rumble blinked once. His expression, as much as a non-human face could have expression, was utterly guileless. "Right. Totally innocent. Of course." Hux was examining the enclosure door, running his fingers over the lock mechanism. "Kiara, come look at this." She joined him, and he pointed to tiny scratches around the access panel. Fresh ones, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. "Someone picked this," he said quietly, "from the inside. Can you check the security footage?" "Already tried on my comm during the drive. System shows a technical error at 0200 hours. Footage from midnight to 0500 is completely corrupted." "Corrupted?" Right, because that's not suspicious at all. Hux pulled out his handheld scanner and ran it over the lock. His eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. There's residue here. Conductive paste, the kind used in electronics repair. We keep it in the maintenance bay. Which is locked. Which is locked, yes, but these three. He gestured at the cubs, who were now all pressed against the glass, watching them with rapt attention. Have had 8 months to observe every single person who works here, including me, including where I keep my keys. Kiara felt lightheaded. So they definitely did it. Oh, they definitely did it. Question is, where did they get Kathic trade tokens? Before Kiara could answer, her comm unit buzzed. She pulled it out, saw the news alert, and felt her blood turn to ice. Local butcher reports. Unusual late-night sale. She opened the article with shaking fingers. Mirko's Meats, located in the commercial district, reported an unusual transaction early this morning. Owner Mirko Petrov states that at approximately 0300 hours, the shop's automated payment system processed a sale of mixed meat products totaling 980 credits. Security footage shows 3 unidentified individuals, approximately 1 meter in height, heavily bundled in what appears to be stolen laundry, operating the self-checkout system. Payment was made using legitimate Kathic trade tokens. When asked if he wished to press charges, Petrov stated, "They paid full price and didn't make a mess. Best customers I've had all month." Colonial police are investigating the incident. Kiara looked up at Hux. Hux looked back at her. Together, they turned to stare at the cubs. Rumble sneezed, which could have been a totally innocent biological function, or could have been the Kathic equivalent of a guilty laugh. They went shopping, Kiara whispered. They actually went shopping, at a butcher shop, using self-checkout. In stolen laundry, Hux added. I'm guessing from the staff lockers. I'm going to be sick. You're going to be arrested. We're going to be arrested. They're going to shut down the center and... The front door chimed, indicating someone had entered the building. Kiara and Hux looked at each other in panic. Hide, Hux hissed. Where? This is a hallway. I don't know. Just act natural. Kiara pressed herself against the wall next to the enclosure, trying to look like someone who had a legitimate reason to be at work 2 hours before her shift started. Definitely not someone harboring criminal aliens. 2 figures rounded the corner, Officers Prue and Kit, the colony's entire police force, looking exactly as thrilled to be awake at this hour as Kiara felt. Prue was short, stocky, with close-cropped dark hair and an expression of permanent exhaustion. Kit was tall, thin, with the kind of neat appearance that suggested he actually ironed his uniform, which on Kethra 5 was practically a personality disorder. Morning, Prue said flatly. We're looking for Kiara Hunt. Kiara's mouth went dry. That's me. We need to ask you some questions about 3 juvenile Kathic aliens in your care. What about them? Kit pulled out his tablet. We're investigating a break-in at Mirko's Meats. Well, not a break-in exactly, more of a, actually, we're not sure what to call it. An unauthorized shopping trip. I heard about that, Kiara said, her voice coming out too high. Terrible, just terrible. The decline of society when people can't even respect a closed sign anymore. Prue raised an eyebrow. The shop wasn't broken into. Someone used the automated system correctly and paid full price. We're mainly trying to figure out who the customers were. Right. Yes, of course. Security footage shows 3 individuals approximately 1 meter tall, Kit continued, reading from his tablet. Moving in a coordinated fashion. Wearing what appears to be human clothing. they purchased 53 pounds of assorted meat products. 53 pounds. Kiara had estimated 50. Close enough to be damning. Fascinating, she managed. Real mystery. Prue was staring at the cubs through the glass. Rumble stared back, his posture relaxed, his tail curled around his feet. The picture of innocence. "These three been in their enclosure all night?" Prue asked. "Of course." Hux jumped in smoothly. "I checked on them during my rounds. Haven't left their habitat." Security footage. Technical glitch. Happens sometimes with the older systems. Prue's expression suggested she didn't believe that for a second, but Kit was already closing his tablet. "Well, if you see or hear anything suspicious, let us know. The butcher doesn't want to press charges. Apparently the tokens were legitimate currency, but we need to file a report." "Absolutely," Kiara said. "First sign of anything weird, you'll be my first call." The officers left, and Kiara sagged against the wall. "Legitimate currency," Hux repeated slowly. "Where would cubs get legitimate Kathic trade tokens?" Kiara's comm unit buzzed again. This time, the name on Tuopontihi, the screen made her heart stop. Udo Krantz, landlord. "Oh no." "What?" "My landlord. He's—" She answered the call, putting it on speaker. "Miss Hunt." Udo's voice was its usual mix of grease and contempt. "I'm outside your building. We need to discuss your overdue rent. Immediately." Kiara closed her eyes. "I'll be right there." She ended the call and looked at Hux. "I have to give him the coins." "Kiara, I don't have a choice. If I don't pay rent today, I'm evicted. And if I'm evicted, I lose my work visa. And if I lose my visa, I'm deported. And if I'm deported—" She gestured at the cubs. "Who takes care of them?" Hux didn't have an answer for that. 20 minutes later, Kiara stood in front of her apartment building, holding 4 Kathic trade tokens and trying not to vomit. Udo Krantz looked like someone had taken the concept of unpleasant human being and given it a physical form just to see if they could. Short, round, with a complexion that suggested he'd never met a vegetable he liked, and a comb-over that defied both physics and good taste. He wore an expensive suit that fit him poorly, and an expression that suggested he enjoyed other people's suffering the way normal people enjoyed coffee. "Miss Hunt," he said, looking her up and down with obvious distaste. "You look terrible." "Good morning to you too, Udo." "It's 11 o'clock. Morning ended 2 hours ago." He pulled out his tablet, making a show of checking his records. "You are now 23 days overdue on rent. Per your lease agreement, I can begin eviction proceedings at 25 days. That gives you exactly—" "I have your money," Kiara interrupted, pulling the coins from her pocket. Udo's eyes went wide, then narrow with suspicion. "Where did you get Kathic trade tokens? Does it matter?" "If they're stolen—" "They're not stolen. They were a gift." "A gift." He said it like she'd claimed they'd fallen from the sky. "From whom?" Kiara met his eyes steadily. "Friends." "You don't have friends." "Wow. Rude, but technically accurate." She held out the coins. 4 tokens, 1,000 credits, exactly what I owe you. Take them or don't, but I've got somewhere to be." Udo snatched the coins from her hand, examining them under the harsh sunlight. He turned them over, checking the engravings, probably running every authentication test he could think of. Finally, grudgingly, he nodded. "These are legitimate. Fine. Rent is paid for this month." He pocketed the coins, then gave her a look that made her skin crawl. "But I know what you are, Miss Hunt. You're one of those alien lovers. Probably got these from some Kathic charity case. It's disgusting, frankly. Humans coming out here, consorting with—" "Are we done?" Kiara cut him off, her patience exhausted. "Because, like I said, places to be." Udo's face flushed an unpleasant purple color. We're done. For now. But you remember what I said. Any trouble, any noise complaints, any hint that you're bringing those animals around my property. Yeah, I'm evicted. Got it. Have a terrible day, Udo. She turned and walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking with suppressed rage and relief in equal measure. Rent paid. One crisis temporarily averted. Now she just had to figure out what to do about the fact that she was harboring 3 juvenile criminals who had somehow acquired legitimate currency and gone shopping for her. Her comm unit buzzed. Hux. Get back to the center, he said without preamble. Now, we have a situation. What kind of situation? The kind with Kathic tribal representatives kind of situation. Kiara's blood turned to ice. I'm on my way. She made it back to the rehabilitation center in record time, running 3 red lights and possibly committing several traffic violations that she'd worry about later, assuming she wasn't in prison. Hux met her at the entrance, his expression grim. They're in conference room B. 2 guards and an elder. They asked for you specifically. Did they say what they want? No, but they've been in there with the cubs for 10 minutes, through the observation window, just watching them. Kiara's heart was doing something complicated, and arrhythmic again. Okay, this is fine. Maybe they don't know. Maybe this is about something else entirely. Kiara? Let me have my denial, Hux. It's all I've got right now. She straightened her jacket, ran her fingers through her hair in a futile attempt to look professional, and walked into conference room B like she wasn't about to face the music for harboring delinquent aliens. 3 Kathic adults stood near the observation window that looked into enclosure K3. The guards were massive, easily 2 meters tall when standing on their hind legs, with thick fur in patterns of black and gray, and eyes that tracked her movement with predatory precision. They wore ceremonial armor that marked them as tribal enforcers, but it was the elder who commanded attention. Ixmora was smaller than the guards, his fur more silver than gray, shot through with white that spoke of age and wisdom. He wore draped fabric in deep blues and purples, and around his neck hung a collection of tokens identical to the ones Kiara had just given to Udo. He turned to face her, and his expression, as much as she could read Kathic expressions after 8 months of study, was amused. Kiara Hunt, he said, in perfect, unaccented English. We meet at last. Elder Ixmora, she replied, bowing slightly in the gesture of respect she'd learned from textbooks. I'm honored by your presence, though I confess surprise at your visit. I imagine you are. His dark eyes glittered with something that might have been humor. Tell me, how was your birthday? Kiara's mouth went dry. It was fine, quiet, nothing remarkable. No unusual gifts? She could feel the trap closing around her, but there was nowhere to run. Define unusual. Ixmora made a sound that could have been a laugh, a chuff of air through his nose. I like you. The cubs chose well. I'm sorry. They chose what? The elder moved closer to the observation window, watching Rumble, Pip, and Flick as they dozed in a pile of fur and contentment. Those 3, he said softly, are not orphans in the way you believe. Kiara blinked. But the mining accident killed their birth pack, yes, a tragedy. But in Kathic culture, cubs who lose their immediate family are adopted by the tribe. They are never truly orphans. He glanced at her. However, these 3 are also nobility. Rumble is the grandson of a council member. Pip and Flick are his cousins. Noble? They're noble? Kiara's brain was struggling to process this information. Then why are they in a rehabilitation center? Why not with the tribal compounds? Because they are juveniles, and juveniles must learn about the world, about other species, about themselves. Ixmora's tail swished slowly. They were placed here specifically to study human behavior, to understand your kind before they mature into positions of leadership. So this whole time they were, what? Doing field work? In a manner of speaking. He turned to face her fully. They were also given allowances, education funds, you might call them. 4 tokens each month to learn about trade, value, and resource management. The coins. The cubs had used their own allowance. The meat, Kiara said slowly. The coins they gave me were theirs to give, Ixmora confirmed. In Kathic culture, bringing fresh kill to another's den is the highest form of respect and affection. It says, I value you. I will provide for you. You are pack. Kiara felt something hot and sharp lodge in her throat. They thought they were taking care of me? You took care of them. Shared your food when the center's budget was cut. Stayed late to ensure they were comfortable. Spoke to them as equals, not specimens. The elder's expression softened. Did you truly think they did not notice? Did not understand? But they can't speak, cannot speak, and do not understand are very different things. Ixmora moved closer to her, and up close she could see the intricate patterns in his fur, the intelligence in his ancient eyes. Those cubs have been listening to humans for 8 months, learning your language, understanding your customs, and last night they heard you in distress. Kiara remembered sitting outside their enclosure, drunk and crying and pathetic, spilling her problems to 3 aliens who she'd thought couldn't understand the specifics, even if they sensed her emotions. They planned this, she whispered, the breakout, the shopping trip. For 3 weeks, according to their reports. Ixmora sounded deeply amused now. They studied the lock mechanisms, observed the security systems, learned about human commerce by watching educational programs on the data tablets you provided for their enrichment. They even practiced wearing clothing by stealing items from the staff lockers over several weeks, a piece at a time so no one would notice. The corrupted security footage? Pip is quite talented with electronics, a skill we encourage. Kiara's legs felt weak. She sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. So, they're not in trouble? In trouble? Ixmora's laugh was definitely a laugh this time, that chuffing sound that made his shoulders shake. They successfully executed a complex operation, demonstrated advanced problem-solving skills, showed loyalty and gratitude to a pack member, and managed to purchase goods using legitimate currency without causing any actual harm or breaking any significant laws. They are going to be celebrated. Celebrated? Kiara repeated numbly. In our culture, these are exactly the qualities we wish to cultivate in future leaders. He paused. However, there is a complication. And there it was. The other shoe, dropping right on schedule. What complication? Ixmora's expression grew serious. The rehabilitation center is being shut down. Your colonial government has deemed it non-essential and is cutting all funding, effective end of this month. The cubs are scheduled for transfer to a corporate facility off-world, essentially a zoo where they will be displayed for profit. Kiara felt like she'd been punched. No, that can't. We were told we had until end of year. The timeline was accelerated. The decision is final. But you're on the tribal council. Can't you intervene? It is complicated, Ixmora said quietly, and for the first time he looked old and tired. There are politics at play. Treaties between my people and your government. If I interfere directly, it could cause diplomatic incidents that would harm far more than these 3 cubs. So what? We just let them ship Rumble, Pip, and Flick off to be spectacles? Prison inmates in everything but name? Not if you fight, Ixmora said simply. Kiara stared at him. Fight? Fight who? The colonial government? I'm one person with no money, no political connections, and a drinking problem. You also have a story, the elder replied. 3 noble cubs who saved their human caretaker's home with birthday gifts, who learned commerce and compassion, who chose you as pack. His eyes glinted. Humans love stories, especially ones that make them feel something. You want me to go public? I want you to tell the truth. What happens after? He made a gesture with his front paw that was distinctly like a shrug. That is up to your species to decide. Hux appeared in the doorway. Kiara, you need to see this. Now. She followed him to his office, where his computer screen showed the local news feed. Her stomach dropped. Heartwarming. Alien cubs pay humans rent with meat and money. The story was everywhere. Someone, probably Mirko the butcher, sensing a publicity opportunity, had sold his security footage to the news outlets. Grainy images of 3 small figures bundled, in oversized human clothes, carefully operating a self-checkout system, their movements coordinated and purposeful. The comment sections were exploding. This is the most precious thing I've ever seen. Who's cutting onions in here? We don't deserve aliens, honestly. Those babies went shopping for their human. I'm crying. Okay, but where can I adopt a Kathic cub because I need this energy in my life? Kiara scrolled through dozens, then hundreds of responses. The story had jumped from local news to colony-wide feeds. Someone had created a hashtag, #ChakCubsPayRent, and it was trending. It's going viral, Hux said unnecessarily. People are losing their minds over this. Kiara's comm unit started buzzing. Messages from news outlets requesting interviews. A message from the colony governor's office. 3 different calls from off-world media organizations. And then, buried in the notifications, a message that made her breath catch. From Colonial Wildlife Fund. Subject: Emergency donation. We've received 15,000 credits in donations in the last hour, designated specifically for the Cathara 5 Rehabilitation Center. Donors are requesting the funds be used to keep the facility open and ensure the cubs featured in recent news reports receive continued care. Please contact us immediately to discuss. Kiara looked up at Hux. 15,000 credits. Check again, she refreshed. 22,000. It's people are actually donating. They're not just donating. Hux turned his screen to show her. 3 different corporate sponsors have reached out offering funding. A publishing house wants to option the story for a children's book. Someone started a petition to keep the center open. It has 40,000 signatures and climbing. Kiara sat down before her legs gave out. This is insane. This is humanity, Ixmora said from the doorway, having followed them. You are an unpredictable species, capable of great destruction, yes, but also great compassion when properly motivated. The cubs understood this. They gambled that if their story reached enough of you, some would care enough to act. Wait, Kiara's brain was catching up. They planned this? The cubs planned for the story to go public? The elder's expression was inscrutable. They are quite intelligent, and they had 8 months to study human media consumption habits. They played us, Kiara whispered. They orchestrated the entire thing, knowing it would... Oh, those brilliant little manipulators. Her comm unit buzzed again. This time, the colonial governor's office, marked urgent. She answered, putting it on speaker. Miss Hunt, This is Governor Paulson's Chief of Staff. The governor would like to meet with you and representatives from the Kathic Tribal Council this afternoon to discuss the rehabilitation center's status. He's received considerable public pressure regarding recent events and wishes to find a mutually beneficial solution. Kiara met Ixmora's eyes. The elder's expression was satisfied, like someone watching a plan come together exactly as predicted. "Tell the governor I'll be there," Kiara said. 2 o'clock work? That will be acceptable. We'll send details shortly. The call ended. Kiara stood there, her mind racing through possibilities, scenarios, outcomes. For the first time in months, something in her chest that had been tight and anxious began to loosen. "They're going to keep the center open," she said softly. "Aren't they?" Political pressure from engaged citizens is remarkably effective, Ixmora replied, especially when combined with corporate sponsorship opportunities and positive publicity. "And the cubs? Will remain in your care, I suspect. The public is now invested in their story. Transferring them to a corporate facility would be, what is the phrase, a PR nightmare." Kiara started laughing. She couldn't help it. The laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep, tinged with relief and disbelief and sheer wonder at the absurdity of it all. "I got hustled by 3 alien children." "You got adopted by 3 alien children," Ixmora corrected gently. "There is a difference." 3 months later, Kiara stood in the newly renovated Kathara 5 Rehabilitation Center, now officially renamed the Interspecies Conservation Initiative, because apparently nothing said, "We take this seriously," like a bureaucratic title, and marveled at how much had changed. The facility had tripled in size. New enclosures, state-of-the-art equipment, a full medical wing, and a staff of 20 instead of the skeleton crew they'd limped along with before. Corporate sponsorships covered operational costs. A government grant funded research initiatives, and donations kept rolling in from people who'd been touched by the story of 3 cubs and their human. Kiara herself had become something she never wanted to be, a minor celebrity. Interview requests, speaking engagements, an actual book deal that she'd signed mostly because the advance would fund her research for the next 5 years. People recognized her on the street. Children asked for autographs. It was deeply weird and occasionally uncomfortable, but she was learning to use the platform for good, advocating for interspecies cooperation, pushing for better policies, making sure stories like the Cubs had happy endings. Rumble, Pip, and Flick had grown. Still juveniles, but bigger now, more confident. They had the run of an entire wing of the facility, with enrichment activities that challenged their considerable intelligence and plenty of interaction with both Kathic and human visitors. They were also, she'd learned, still planning things, which brought her to this moment, standing in her apartment doorway at 6 in the morning, staring at the open door she'd definitely locked last night. "Please, tell me this isn't another meat delivery," she called into her apartment. No meat this time. Instead, sitting in the middle of her living room floor, was a plant. Not just any plant. A Kathic moonflower, a rare, bioluminescent species that bloomed once every few years and was worth a small fortune. It sat in a beautiful handcrafted pot, already glowing softly in the dim morning light. Next to it, a note written in careful, stilted English that had definitely been practiced. "For air. You said den smells. Happy not birthday. R. P. F." Kiara pressed her hand to her mouth, caught between laughter and tears. She'd mentioned once, in passing, that her apartment needed better air quality. One offhand comment 3 weeks ago. They'd listened. They'd remembered. They'd found a solution. Her comm unit buzzed, a message from Hux, with a photo attached. Security footage from last night showing 3 bundled figures carefully navigating the colony streets, carrying a large pot between them, moving with the precision of a military operation. The message read, "They bypassed 6 different security systems, picked 2 locks, and left 0 trace evidence. I'm equally impressed and terrified. These kids are going to run the galaxy someday." Kiara looked at the moonflower, already filling her apartment with soft light and sweet fragrance. She thought about meat deliveries and Kathic trade tokens, about broken locks and corrupted footage, about 3 cubs who'd seen someone in need and decided to fix it with the tools they had. She thought about how the galaxy was full of different species, different cultures, different ways of showing love and loyalty and care. And she thought about how sometimes the family you chose, or that chose you, came in unexpected forms. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty apartment, knowing somehow that wherever the cubs were right now, they'd understand. Her comm unit buzzed again. Another news notification. A follow-up piece about the rehabilitation center's success, featuring quotes from Governor Paulson about how the program was a model for interspecies cooperation. Kiara smiled, closing her door and making a mental note to install better locks. Not that it would stop them, but it was the principle of the thing. She had work to do, cubs to check on, a facility to run, a future to build. And maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't doing so badly at this whole coexisting with alien species thing after all. Not when 3 cubs could teach an entire colony about compassion, with nothing more than raw meat, trade tokens, and an absurd amount of planning. Humanity, indeed.